In our last video, we removed the carpet from this porch and ground off the mastic to get back to a nice concrete slab. We have one more project to finish this up, and that's to build a railing. There was a metal railing in this spot originally. We decided to replace that with a wood railing that will be a little bit more sturdy and we can tie in around the whole porch. Our first step is going to be dealing with these columns since the railing is going to anchor to the column. We'd like to update this to be more of just a standard square post look rather than this ornate column style that's here. At first I was thinking that this is probably just a 4x4, 4x6 post on the inside with a shell around it to be decorative, but it doesn't appear that way. There's these 2x treated blocks that the post is sitting on, and it's hollow up underneath there, and there's no post going all the way to the ground, so it does appear that this is a structural column. We are going to need to replace this treated 2x at the bottom because it's starting to get a little bit soft, but the column itself seems nice and solid. So I think our best bet is going to be just to replace that and then make a box around this column. So we're going to have about a 10 or 10.5 inch wide box, which is a little bit bigger than maybe what I was planning, but it'll do the job. These columns are tapered, so they're narrower at the top than they are at the bottom. And then there's these little ornate pieces at the top and bottom that are wider than the rest of the column. Till about here, the column is about 9 inches, and then it tapers down to about 8 inches here. But then it gets out to almost 10.5 here, and this square at the top is 10.5. Ideally, if I was boxing this out, I'd like to be able to take all the 4 boards and miter them 45 so that they come to a point at the corner. But to do that with 10.5 inches here, we would need, it's another 1.5 inches to the outside, so we need 12 full inches. Well, a 2x12 is 11.25 inches, and so I can't get anything wider than a 2x12. We can box them and butt up the corners, but it's harder to hide that gap. So that means we're going to need 1x12s to make a box around this. And it looks like a 1x12x8 is about 25 bucks a piece in our area, so that's pretty expensive. 2x12s are cheaper at about 15 bucks for an 8-foot stick, but then we're adding even more thickness. One could, in theory, rip a 2x12 in half to make it 2 1x12s, which then that would be $7.50 a piece. But I don't really have the right tools to do that. But you know me, I'm gonna try anyways. This table saw will rip a 4x4, so 3.5 inches tall, but that's max capacity. So if I try to stand these up on end and rip down, I can go 3.5 inches deep, flip it over, go 3.5 inches the other way, then there'll be a little over 4 inches left in the middle. So I'm gonna attempt to do that, and then I'll try to cut that middle part out with a reciprocating saw. That'll leave a pretty rough edge on the back, but we can plane that down, and it's gonna be the inside anyway, so we're not gonna see that. It doesn't really matter if it's not perfectly smooth. We'll set the blade so that the center of the blade is 3/4 inch. That's what we got. Not 100% perfectly centered, but I'm not really worried about that. If I get a 1/2 inch thick board at the end of it, I'm fine with that. So this is definitely not quite an even cut. You know, we'll have to plane this down a little bit, but it really doesn't matter if we're completely smooth on the inside. I'm just gonna rough hit with a hand planer, and that'll be good enough for what we're doing on this project. So pretty much from the center of the column downward, we're 9 inches in diameter. It's pretty smooth here and then tapers as it goes up. So if we're 10.5 is our inside dimension, I'm gonna go ahead and put some 1x4 blocking. It'll be 3/4 of an inch on either side to get us out to that 10.5 to give something solid in the center to mount the post to. I'll probably just do a foot or 18 inches on the front and back, but the sides, I'm gonna make it run from the bottom all the way up to here, because on this side, we're probably gonna be mounting a gate going across here, and then around on the back side, the railing is gonna attach to it. So I like to have that solid blocking all the way down. It's nice to have a project under a roof for when it's raining. I always feel like I'm trying to work outside when it's raining, but no big deal for this. So the other issue we're gonna deal with is this rib right here is basically all the way out to that 12 inches. I'm gonna be pulling these blocks off one by one and replacing them. And as I do that, I'm just gonna take a Sawzall and cut that down. Just shy of 81. So I'm gonna use a scrap cutoff here to get my spacing, because we know there's gonna be a little bit of gap, and I wanna have that gap on the inside where I can easily fill that, rather than being like this, because that seam all the way around, that would then create a rounded corner that wouldn't look very good. But if we do it like this and put the gap that way, that'll be easy to just fill with some caulking or putty and then paint it. So now each one's tacked all the way around at the top with just one nail. And then I'm just gonna go around and square each one up at the bottom. So now we got this column all set, it's time to build the railing. It's gonna be relatively standard railing construction with 2x2 balusters. And you can buy pre-cut balusters at 36 or 48 inches or 42 inches, different options. But when I did the math on them, it's over twice the cost of just buying 2x4s, ripping them in half, and then cutting them to length how you want them. So I'll give you one guess which option I picked. It only took about 10 minutes to rip down the 10-foot 2x4s and then cut them into thirds to give us 40-inch balusters. That's going to give us an overall finished height of about 45 inches to the top of the railing. So this is the whole lumber package, at least as far as I know. I'm gonna go through and paint spray all this. Hopefully this will get 95% of the paint work done before we actually install it, which will save a ton of time. I think this is the entire lumber package that I need. If it's not, you'll see me installing a random unpainted board here in just a minute. There's these anchors in the concrete from the old railing, one on either end, and then this one in the middle. Except the one in the middle isn't right in the middle. I'm gonna have a post in the center, but I'm gonna put it right in the center. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut all these anchors off. We're not gonna reuse them. I got these post base I'm gonna use to anchor the 4x4 posts. We've got 4 holes for screws, and then a large hole in the center for an anchor. Tried to use Tapcon screws and I broke every one of them. I think the screws I had were too long, and once they reach a point, they can't go any deeper, even though I had it drilled all the way. So I'm gonna go for the anchor hole in the center. I'll have to break out the big guns for this one. I'm gonna use this different style of anchor. It's a drop-in anchor, and then you put a bolt in rather than it having threads and then you put a nut on top of it. Main reason is just because of what I had on hand. But the side bonus is these, since it's a bolt on top and not a stud sticking up, you don't have to drill into the post as far to accommodate to let it set over the top of it. Fun fact on these anchors, if you're lazy and don't vacuum the concrete dust out of them, get in the hole on the bottom, and then as you try to compress it, eventually the anchor will just shear off. And then you'll be stuck drilling it out for the next way too much time. Code in our area is a 4-inch gap maximum between any of the openings. That's between the balusters or between the floor and the bottom. That's why we set the bottom at 3.5. And I'm gonna go ahead and set the balusters 4 inches on center. So that'll be like a 2.5-inch gap, which is a pretty standard thing to do. And it makes it easy because then you just have 3 per foot. I've got them all pre-drilled. You can see here, I've got them all lined up on this side. But we're not all the same length over here. I just kind of took the lazy route and gang cut them all that way. The ends are a little bit longer and I didn't trim the ends. My plan is to just mount them up, and then I'll chalk a line and trim them all to the same length with a skill saw. Why is it always when I get the whole thing stood up almost right into place that I remember I forgot a step? We got to drill the bottom of those posts so that they can slide over those bolt heads. I'm just gonna go with the big 7/8 bit to give us plenty of wiggle room. All right, take 2. That should keep everything standing up straight. All right, so that is this piece. We still have to put the top cap on, but I'm gonna swing over here and get this little corner piece put in before we put the top cap, because we'll miter this corner and tie them both together. So I want to have that all done before I put the top on. This corner is also what's going to give keep this top from wiggling. So we need to put another one of these blocks here. Then go for plumb. See where we are in terms of plumb here. That's still plumb. It's a new day. All we've got left to finish up this side is to get the 2x6 cap on the top, and then we'll be moving on to the other side and basically doing the same thing. I'm going to pre-drill these before I screw them. Remember how when I was painting everything, I said, I think this is the entire lumber package that I need. If it's not, you'll see me installing a random unpainted board here in just a minute. Here it is. So I'm going to fill these gaps. What I'm going to try to use is this plastic wood. It's basically a spackling designed for wood. Call it all-purpose wood filler. Looks and acts like real wood. Well, it's supposed to be spreadable, and last I checked, real wood isn't very spreadable, so I hope it doesn't act too much like real wood. It's very thick, but it seems to kind of spread a lot like a spackling would, so that's good. I'm basically going to just run down this gap. It's not perfect, but it really doesn't look too bad. It's sandable, so my thought is I'll just put this on and then I'll come through and sand it after it's ready to be painted tomorrow. So next evening I got all that wood filler put on and then did caulking around the top last night. I came out earlier today and sanded that wood filler. There was a good bit of shrinkage despite the packaging saying resist shrinks and cracks. It definitely shrunk and cracked. What I decided to do, because I did want to try and get it painted tonight, was I ended up filling in the cracks with caulking and just spreaded that out with a putty knife. Since caulking's dried in 30 minutes to an hour and ready to paint. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab a paint roller and get to work. Get our one missing post here. Well, I'd say this turned out pretty nice. Really wasn't that big of a project. Honestly, dealing with these columns probably took more time than actually building the railing. Now all that's left to do is sit back and enjoy. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope to see you back here on our next one.